All righty, everybody. We have a quorum, and it's a little bit after 6:30. We waited for folks to come in. We're going to get started with the meeting, but before we do, I'm going to read off the following disclosure, just for the record. Pursuant to Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2020, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, and the March 31st, 2025 extension granted by Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting for the town of Bridgewater will be fully remote and accessible to the public through remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance is permitted. Citizens who wish to tune into the meeting may do so via Zoom, which is provided on the agenda. So that being said, first off, let's call to order. And now that we've called to order, we are going to look at item B on the agenda, approval of minutes for December 27th, 2023. This was our last meeting for calendar year 2023. And I just would like to ask members of the group if they have any questions or need any changes or revisions to it, please speak up now or forever hold your peace. I see Julie. Did you need something changed on the minutes?
No, I'm good, I think. Sorry.
Alrighty. Any further comments or questions regarding the minutes for December 27th? Alrighty, if there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Second.
Rig made the motion, Julie seconded. Josh, would you be so kind as to take the roll for us?
MJ,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Rig,
I will abstain from that. I don't believe I was at the meeting.
Lee,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Catherine.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion was approved.
All right, moving on to item C on the agenda, public comment. If there are any members of the public who are in attendance, they may do so by raising their hand virtually or by volunteering their voice. If they do, please give your name and address here in town so we can make sure it's written into the record. Not seeing anybody. Let's move on to old business, letter D, which would be a report from the subcommittee, which would be the subcommittee of the Capital Expenditure Finance and Policy Group, which would be myself, Rig, and Eric. Unfortunately, at this time, we don't really have anything. We're hoping to at least have some conversation on this when we get into the first budget meeting. At least that's what we were agreeing to previously. I think that's still going to probably happen that way, Josh, just because we'll have everybody in the room at that point. But I haven't heard anything else otherwise. And if you haven't heard anything from the school district, I have to assume that that is probably what's going to happen next, which will be we'll discuss the matter in public meeting with the school committee when the time comes to do a joint meeting.
Yep, I think that's
excellent. Alrighty, so and after that, there's no other old business. So let's move on to the new business for which we're here today. The first item of new business is letter A, review and discussion of revenue sharing calculations. It comes courtesy to us of the acting finance director, but I do also see that the town manager is here. So Ms. Garini, Mr. Dutton, y'all have the floor.
So just by way of introduction, then I'm going to turn it over to Lori. Each year around about this time, we come to you just with a little bit of an update on our revenue projections for the upcoming fiscal year FY25, and try to give you sort of a sense of our outlook and where we think we're going. FY25 is obviously a long way away. It doesn't start till July 1st. Of this upcoming year, and then it goes through June 30th of 2025. But we try to get an early estimate on where we're going to be, and we build our budget around that. So for those that don't know, Massachusetts is one of the few states where our budgets are generally driven by revenues. The state caps, or actually it was public referendum, statewide referendum capped our increases in budgets, operating budgets, basically 2.5%. They actually cap the amount that real estate taxes can climb each year by 2.5%. So we're limited by that right off the bat. We also then are looking at our local receipts, which are things that we raise, monies that we raise locally aside from taxes, and we try to give an estimate, try to get an accurate estimate of what those revenues are going to look like the following year. So over the last few years, we've had very good local receipts, and we've had very good new growth. New growth being additional buildings that basically come online and are taxable. So new growth last year, I think, was a little over $1 million, which was pretty good for us. And then local receipts have climbed over the last few years very nicely. So I think we're sort of at this sort of inflection point with the economy. Lori and her team try to keep very close tabs on economic indicators and where we think the economy is going, because the economy has a direct influence or a direct impact on the amount of local receipts that we can expect. So with that, just by way of explanation, with that, I will turn it over to Lori, and she'll give you a little bit of an idea of where we're headed and what it looks like for FY25.
Thank you, Michael. I think I can share my screen. Josh, can you let me share, please?
Should be all set.
Okay. All right, which one do I want here? All right. Are we looking at the presentation here, or are we looking at my email? All right.
The presentation.
What's that?
We could see the presentation.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. I was like, oh, silence. All right, so just like Michael said, we're here just to kind of give you the introduction, and we'll also show you what we have for sources to cover the uses of the budget. So we'll just start off with a little kickoff, and like Michael said, there's a lot of challenges that we're constantly looking at. The first one, obviously, he touched on was the economic projection of the country, the state, the local. So we look at everything going on in the whole in the country and the world, and obviously in the local community. So these are just a few of, I don't want to read everything out to you, and I can certainly share the presentation to everyone if anyone wants to look at it again. But we have a lot of challenges in front of us, including, the unknown of the economy, the known and non-discretionary expenses of healthcare and pension costs and infrastructure and construction inflation, wage inflation, energy inflation. We have to prepare for our liabilities in the future and, our everyday goods and services. So we take all these into consideration. And we also know that keeping our long-term financial stability is key. And when we bring our annual budgets together, as everyone knows, well, most people know that the council starts in November with a budget resolution, and that kind of really kicks off the goals and where the town needs to be when we start the budget process. But when we do make our revenue estimates and our expenditure estimates, we are always looking to be mindful to keep our stability in order. So when we're talking about stability, we use the assumptions for our revenue, which Michael pointed out. Our tax levy is 70% of our budget for the operations of the town. And it only grows at 2.5%. Plus there's new growth, there's debt exclusions and things like that that are used to fund, the debt that we pick up along the way. So we know the state aid just come out with the governor's preliminary budget, and it's about 3%. So it's overall, when the governor says, local aid is increased by 3.5%, and Chapter 70, which is mostly for the school counts a lot on their budget with the Chapter 70 issued by the state. And that came out at 4%, but that overall, she's talking in general, but it doesn't mean that our school's going to get 4% or our community is going to get 3%. The way they formulate everything, it's a general statement, but it looks like, we will locally get the 3% local aid. When we saw the cherry sheets for the school, it didn't look like 4% to us, but we'll just have to watch the numbers carefully. So when we look at our revenue, we look at our local receipts, which are our motor vehicle excise, our permits from the building department, our fees, planning, and then just other departmental revenue that helps support the operations of the department, including our ambulance receipts budget that is used to support the operations of the EMS and the ambulance in the fire department. So, we take these really into consideration when we're planning everything, knowing that, we kind of categorize revenues as discretionary, non-discretionary. So non-discretionary, we really can't cut those expenses because whatever they are, they are. So the non-discretionary includes, the state assessments that are charged, our health insurance and our liabilities are just things that we have to live with. Discretionary is what we base our operating budget on, which is for 52% of our general fund budget is education generally, and the rest of the operations is about 48%. That includes debt service, that includes everything. So when we're talking about stability again, we go back to when we do our revenue estimates to make sure that we're estimating some free cash, which is the only real source of our stabilization funds, our capital stabilization, our money that we put aside for employee liability. So that's really vital when we're making our forecasting and putting together our budgets. And you can see from this slide from last year when we closed the books, we had $4 million in free cash, which is what we were hoping to get. It was more than the 2% of our budget resolution, because we did well with some of our revenues. But so this is the only source of things that, like capital, that the departments and infrastructure that we put aside to fund. So we take that into consideration when we're at this time, so that we can figure out how we're going to pay for things. And this is just a snapshot from the DLS. The DLS is our state, it's Division of Local Services. All the communities in the state have to do their reporting through the Commonwealth, and they do a nice job. And I can certainly give people the links to all these info. So when we're reporting all of our numbers, they put all of Bridgewater's numbers in their data bank, and you can go to the DLS and see these numbers and compare to other communities, if you're interested in that. But so this slide shows that 69.76 is coming from our tax levy, which is our real estate and property tax bills. So that only grows 2.5% every year. The other revenues, we can see we got local receipts in here, state aid, and those fluctuate, but the levy is the biggest source of revenue, and that is always 2.5%, unless there's some kind of override, which we haven't seen in a long, long time. And this is also just a snapshot from the last 5 years. So we're always going back and forth and looking at our historical expenditures as well as our revenues to see that we're projecting, in a conservative and on-trend way. So these are some of the expenditures in the general fund. Education being the largest. So last year's adopted budget, it was $71+ million, and 55% of the adopted budget was for the school. That included, our out of district, our Norfolk Aggie, Bristol Plymouth, Bristol Aggie, and Bridgewater Rainham. And then the operating budget is 45%. So out of our operating budget, 84% is salaries, which we know salaries is the biggest expenditure in the schools as well. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we're looking for when we're estimating our revenues. So we always make sure, again, that our financial stability is on our minds all the time. So we want to make sure that we are, doing all the things that we need to do to stay stable and on top of everything. This helped us a lot because the last 10 years or so, 7 mostly, we've been really sticking to these policies. And when we had the COVID budget cycle, we were one of the only towns that, we were on top of keeping our staffing in, we didn't have any reductions. We kept on, we didn't miss a beat. We took care of the residents and the services of the town, even though we were all working from home. But we were able to do that because we planned for some of these unexpected things. So that's the presentation of that. Let me see if I can share those again. But that's what we take into consideration for when we do our budget. Let me see if I can do this now. Share. So again, we put together the finance team with the town manager's office, a budget timeline, as you can see on your screen. And we can share this with everyone so you can look at it. Oh, that's not sharing yet. There it goes. Sorry.
While you're bringing that up, maybe it'd be a good time just to see if there are any questions so far.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want people to forget their questions.
Good point.
I was actually gonna start off on a couple of questions. First and foremost was going to be the OPEB line item. I saw that the total obligation now $31 million. Looking at the free cash that we had the last fiscal year, how much did we allocate to that $31 million liability from the last fiscal year?
Last fiscal year, we allocated, I think $110,000. So
I guess my follow-up question would be is, and this might be directed to Michael or to you, Lori, given the free cash that we've gotten the last couple of fiscal years, is there a potential to maybe raise the amount that we're taking from free cash to put into OPEB? I feel like that's probably one of the things I know we collectively as communities in Massachusetts in some cases have held off on it until the point where those deadlines are starting to happen. And those, I think the earliest one is like the early 2030s. I'd like personally to think that the town's not going to be caught off guard on those. Is there any discussion on the back end between the town manager's office, finance department, and the town council about maybe funding those a little bit more vigorously in the next few years?
So I can handle that if you want. So we keep in pretty close touch with the Department of Revenue as well as the administration, both the last administration and this administration. So roughly a decade ago, there was, as you know, MJ, there was at least an effort, a fairly concerted effort on the state level to sort of resolve what would happen with the OPEB liabilities. Keep in mind, every town, literally every 351 cities and towns have OPEB, other post-employment benefit obligations that are largely unfunded. And the state has a huge OPEB liability too. And every state agency, quasi-governmental agency, and so on, so on. So it's not an issue that's specific to us by any means. We've done what our auditors have asked us to, and that is acknowledge that we do have a liability and make every effort to allocate funds consistently. I think from an auditing perspective, it's certainly important to try to fund what we can, but more important to be consistent about the funding that obligation. And again, just an informational item for people that have a hard time trying to wrap their heads around what OPEB really is. So the best way to look at it is, we are using current dollars to pay for current retiree health benefits, basically. That's the biggest chunk of post-employment benefits. And so similar to what happened with retirement pension payments some years ago, we are now required to play catch up. And so what Governmental Accounting Standards Board has said is that the new policy is to acknowledge and book that liability on your balance sheet, and then do what you can to begin to fund it. So the wide assumption is the governor is proposing to sort of reconfigure that effort, or reignite that effort that sort of arguably failed 10 years ago, and put a commission together that'll address OPEB a little more globally for the entire state. And what has been talked about is, once that pension liability is caught up, and it depends on what jurisdiction you're in, whether that's going to be 2028, 29, 30, 31, 32, in that time frame. At that point, then the feeling is that the legislature will begin to require cities and towns to catch up with their OPEB liability according to a schedule similar to what we've been used to with the pension catch up. So to answer MJ's question, we've been consistent with our auditors. We are consistent with their recommendations about every year allocating some amount of money. But our challenge is that our capital needs, our capital needs were deferred or ignored for, a good 10, 15, 20 years. And so we've got a huge pent up capital demand, as well as the huge pent up OPEB demand. And so we try to balance all those needs out as best we can. Our current balance in OPEB, I think, Lori, is over $1 million, something like that.
Yeah, 1.2 million is currently.
So we have made some good faith effort there, which is recognized by our auditors. But certainly, if we had the opportunity to contribute more, we definitely would do that. So that's a really long answer to the relatively short question.
Okay. Well, if the committee will indulge me, I do have at least one more question before I let other colleagues ask. Michael, and also Lori, the question I did want to ask was actually relating to new growth from revenue receipts. I know some of our revenues come from building permits and new construction in town. I know that the markets haven't necessarily been great for construction the last couple of years, especially in the last year alone. More people have actually held on to their homes and actually sell. Here in town, are we noticing any type of market slowdown of housing, building permits going up for new houses, new construction? I know there is a few areas in town that are looking at for new construction, but are we seeing a general slowdown of that at this point, or a leveling off? So I assume at some point we will run out of room to build. That was my other question.
You're jumping way ahead. The short answer is yes, we are seeing a slowdown, but that's coming up. I think next segment, Lori's just going to run through the budget timeline, I think, and then we'll jump into the sources and uses document itself, if that works.
Okay.
I think I have two questions. The first is, how do we wait, I'm sorry, let me back up. So the DLS, the chart that you had shown, Lori, how do we compare with like-minded towns with respect to operating budget, the percentage of that in school budget? And are we falling short? Are we, aligned with like-minded towns like ours? I'm just sort of curious.
Yeah, well, Michael probably can answer more of like a comparatively how the town of Bridgewater, because we're in Plymouth County, we have a college, we have a prison, we have a regional school district. So it's hard for us to compare with our neighbors because of our, different schools, and a lot of the communities in the Commonwealth have their own school, and it's not a regional. So, but overall, I think, we're per capita, we're pretty good. We're in a good percentile, as well as I think for spending, I think we're less than our neighbors because we don't have a lot of the debt service that a lot of other communities have. So, which we're building up now because of the infrastructure needs. But I think, compared to other like-minded size communities, we're in pretty good shape. But I can defer to Michael because he's been answering this question for the last.
So Rick, the short answer is we are a little bit in terms of per capita spending, we're less than average on both the school side and the town side. So if you look at it's always hard to pick comparables, but if you look at other DOC communities, Walpole is an example of what used to be a DOC, not anymore, DOC community, but not anymore. We are consistently spending a lot less on an annual basis than our sort of peer communities, and that's reflected as well in the schools. So we generally don't spend a lot. So we spend a lot less on general government. We spend quite a bit less on the school side as well, if that answers. I don't have numbers right in front of me, but we can certainly generate some of those numbers and give so the finance committee can see sort of some of those comparisons.
Thank you.
And the website, the DLS website, Greg, you can just go on there and pick, I don't know, 3 communities, 4 communities, and you can just like look at Middleborough, what is their tax rate? What is their, I mean, you can see everything on there. And it can really be powerful if you're just looking, what's the tax rate around? Like we can do that. We can look per capita. We can look, annual revenues, annual local receipts, annual reserves. So if you go to the DLS website, it's really a great tool, especially Michael and I have talked about this a lot, like, educating our committee members to where you can find all of this great, and it's graphs and real easy to navigate. They've made it really easy. The state has done a really good job at trying to get all the data from all the communities. So you can go in there and go in and out rather easily if you're looking for specific information.
Laurie, it's Julie. Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand on this thing after all these times, but is it important to know that you're comparing apples to apples, or like you said, I mean, Middleborough is close to us, but they have more business than us, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, and
so
their tax base is different, you know,
right,
they're, you know, they have farmland, they have this, they have, you know,
right, and we have, you know, the second, well, I think the
Yeah.
second largest school district, in, you know, regionalized school district
Right.
in the state too. So
Right.
the fact that we gave a big chunk of it, the district, you know, that's what happens when you have the second largest and you don't have a lot of
Right.
businesses, right?
Yep.
Okay. No, it's all good resources, and the more information, the better. I just want people to understand that you have to think of the whole picture and not just because they're on our border, you know?
Right, and that's what's hard to make a comparison to. Like I
Right.
said, I mean, we do have this college and the prison, so what does that look like for tax revenue? It's, you know, state-owned land, so like we might have a certain number for state-owned land that another community doesn't have because they don't have those big things. So, you know, it's just looking at each kind of you know, different areas of and the government styles too. Some have town meetings, some have council, some have cities, you know, they have mayors, and so there's so many things to compare. Um, but I think there is a lot of information though.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you both.
And for reference, for members, if you do want to look into the data that's from Division of Local Services, the website address is going to be www.mass.gov/DLS.
I can send a link out to Josh too. He can
That would
share
be
with
great.
everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Sure. All right. So with the budget calendar, I probably should show the other revenue source first, but just to let you know that we're trying, you know, to make sure that we have some kind of timeline to communicate with the schools, with the council, with your committee, with the town council budget subcommittee. So we tried to plug in all the dates, you know, knowing when our really important dates are. We're looking to have the hearing for the budget in May. And then we also we wrote in the school's timeline and when they need to get their budget done. So so we can share this with you. We know that once the preliminary budget numbers based on our revenue that we're going to share with you in a second, once that goes to council, they'll do the you know, the referral of the preliminary, and then you guys will start the meetings with all of the details. So that being said, and then let me
I do have
share.
a follow-up question, Lori and Michael. Um, so this is in reference to the 70% um tax levy on real estate taxes. I guess I'm just trying to understand, you know, is there an aggressive, or not even aggressive, is there a strategy to, you know, to bring in more businesses? I know someone, I think it was Steve or someone, or Laura, who mentioned Middleborough, you know, being a community that has a lot more businesses. You know, when I drive around the community, you know, I see a lot of empty parking lots and boarded up buildings that could potentially be businesses, um, that obviously would bring in revenue, and perhaps begin to balance out, you know, the revenue that the town is receiving, because 70% from real estate tax, you know, I would imagine someone who, you know, who is fresh out of college looking to buy a house, and, you know, while the real estate price is what it is, but the real estate price, in terms of taxes is what would probably deter someone from wanting to move to Bridgewater as a community. So I'm just trying to understand, you know, where are we at in terms of like the town's thought process to start filling these businesses, um, particularly those, you know, those empty buildings that are commercial property?
So that's a good question, Reagan, and let me see if I can answer that sort of in a clear way. So yeah, the short answer, yes. A big part of our vision to reality initiative is to generate vibrancy in town, business vibrancy, and so empty storefronts, empty parcels, yes, that's a huge part of the Vision to Reality initiative. And so we're trying to make it very clear or we're trying very hard to sort of eliminate this notion that we're business unfriendly, and that's been something that's, people have said for as long as I've been in Bridgewater and for 10 years before that, I think. So we're trying to shed that I don't think that's accurate, but we're also trying to shed that sort of reputation. On the real estate tax. So
Michael, before you move on from that, just for clarity, what is the town doing to try to shed that? I understand that that's the goal, but what are the steps or initiatives to accomplish that?
The first initiative to the first part of the initiative is to get revised zoning passed. So we've talked a lot about form-based zoning. Form-based zoning basically tells a community, or tells developers, here's what the community wants to see in a particular location. And in this case, the downtown, the central business district. The form-based code is very explicit about what we would like to see. And in return for proposing to build exactly what we want to see, there's an expedited permitting process. So we can get you through the permitting process in maybe not any permitting process, to tell you the truth. If you meet all the criteria, you can get through and get your building permit within a couple of weeks. If you don't want to follow the form-based code and you want to do something a little different, then there is a process. It's not dissimilar to the process we have now. Going to, depending on what the issue is, going to the planning board for site plan approval, or what have you. So the form-based code really lays out for developers, makes it very easy for a developer to say, to plan, because if they look at our form-based code, it's basically like a spec manual for what the building has to look like. And as long as you follow the, check through the entire checklist of things that we want to see, then your permit is issued as of right, and there's essentially no planning board review of that. So that's one thing. We have several prongs. We're leveraging BSU's cybersecurity program, thinking that really is a business development opportunity for us, to encourage folks that graduate from BSU's program with eventually a master's or a bachelor's. I think this coming year it'll be a bachelor's program. Encourage those folks to stay in town, start businesses, encourage cybersecurity businesses to locate to Bridgewater, because that's where the qualified and competent graduates for that field are going to be coming from. We are working with the MBTA on moving the MBTA platform from the backside of the Bridgewater State campus to a more central location in town. We think that'll improve the business climate in town. It'll also sort of facilitate better circulation, if we do it right, better circulation of automobiles in the right place, and the better circulation of pedestrian traffic, including BSU students not having to cross Plymouth Street anymore. So we also are doing a facade improvement program. We're about to apply for a community development block grant that will finance a facade improvement program for existing businesses. And that's, for those that don't know, that's either a no interest or a principal forgiveness type of loan for businesses to improve their facades and with you know, just sort of dress it up, so to speak. And then down the road, we're looking at a number of other things, but those are sort of some of the basic ideas of what we're doing now, Lee, if that makes sense.
And just to follow up, Michael, thank you so much for the outline. Is there who sits on this strategy team, or is there a strategy team that serves like scouts that go out and, you know, speak with businesses, small, medium, and large, and really petition and advocate for Bridgewater? So if you could kind of just give us a layout of what's the makeup of those folks who are having these conversations with potential businesses?
Sure. So right now, our community and economic development department is tasked with doing outreach, business outreach. We have really upped our game. We've been in discussions with, you know, probably at least over the last year, at least a dozen different developers looking to redevelop different portions of our downtown area. And actually, we appear to be very close to what I think will be a very successful redevelopment of the old bowling alley building and the next door, the Friendlies next door, and then the vacant lot in that stretch of Broad Street. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we will see something there fairly soon after the zoning gets adopted. But we've also had discussions with the developers looking to do the Perkins Foundry about what that development will look like. As you may know, that development got through the planning board, and so they are off and running. They probably have 2 years, I would say, of environmental issues and permitting to do with the state. But at least that was approved, and we shaped that project the way we wanted to see it. We've also had some discussions with the owners of Campus Plaza about potential redevelopment opportunities there, which would include revised commercial space, mixed residential, and there seems to be some excitement, at least within that ownership group, about the stuff that's happening there. And then along those lines, I've had discussions with a number of quality, what I would call quality developers who are looking to do quality redevelopment of historic properties, and are looking at the zoning, revised zoning, to see what opportunities might be there for them. So right now, Rig, it's mostly internal. That is what we do. That's our jobs. There will come a time, and I think that time is probably coming pretty quick, that we will be asking residents to play a much bigger role in shaping specifically the downtown. And I know we have the council has a downtown redevelopment committee made up of 3 councilors, and I think the expectation is to begin to expand that with citizens to sort of guide some of the efforts that we're looking to make. So that answer your question?
It does. If I may just ask one more question, I'm so sorry. Could you mention the zoning a few times? Is that the roadblock in the way, and what's stopping us as a town from revising it and getting that approved?
Music's my ears. Yes, that is a roadblock. Has been a roadblock, I think, for a long time, and I think honestly, it's not just Bridgewater. I think it's a roadblock to quality development in many towns, cities and towns. Zoning is often a reflection of the whims of the day and the whims of the moment. And I think with what we've got proposed in front of the council right now, and it's gotten through the planning board, But I think what we are looking at is something that preserves and protects the interests of residents, and also can be an exciting tool for quality developers. So that really ultimately, when we look at new growth and we look at community development, I look at community development through a slightly different lens. I'm not looking at just, let's get as much economic stuff going on as possible. I mean, communities aren't made up of dollars. Communities are made up of people. So community development to me means, quality places to live, quality places to go out to dinner, quality people that the quality development can bring into town. So ultimately, it's all about bringing, the people that we want to see in the community into the community and invite them, make Bridgewater a destination community and not just a place where they could find a less expensive house than anywhere else. So that said, I think zoning really drives almost everything in the community, and I don't think most residents really realize, how much that it really does drive progress in terms of community development. So we're taking a very serious look at zoning. We will continue to take a serious look at zoning as well. Right now, we're focused on the downtown area, but I think our in future years we'll be looking at zoning all over town and looking to make sure that we are maximizing our opportunities for quality community development.
Thank you.
All right. In the interest of keeping things moving along, I would ask that members, if they have further questions regarding economic development, if they could send Michael those questions of their own free time, or if they're interested, I will shamelessly plug, I am a member of the planning board. We always welcome the public to join those meetings. We also do them virtually as well. So if folks do have questions similar to the ones that they may want to ask Michael, they can also ask members of the planning board in open meetings, since they do have a open comment session. But they also usually have our community economic development director, Robert Ruley, present. So he may also be able to answer those questions, so that Michael won't have to be asked all those questions at one time, and we can remain on task. But I also would remind members additionally that when asking questions, please ask them through the chair, not directly through the chair, and the chair will allow the opportunity to speak, just because we want to keep things moving and keep things in order with Robert's Rules of Order. That being said, so we can move the topic along further, let's get back to the conversation at hand. Lori, you have a chart on screen for us.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, MJ. So this is our preliminary revenue projections for fiscal 25. So we've taken a look at all the historical and the projection and our projections, as well as the history, taking in all considerations of our financial policies, of the budget resolution that you guys approved, probably in November or December. So we take all the tools that we have and we try to put together some numbers that we expect to be able to put together a budget. So again, this is preliminary, so we're always projecting 16 months. We don't know how the year is going to go, but we're pretty good at using all the tools that I showed in the presentation. So I can go over this more in detail, but I'm gonna turn this over to Michael, and he can probably talk about what his budget message will be, and how these numbers will factor into that. So, Michael.
Thanks, Lori. I'll run through this relatively quickly because as we both said, these are very preliminary, and it's not really worth a whole lot of time to dig into detail in most of these numbers because they are so preliminary. So we're looking at levy revenue of a total of 55,562. I'm going to make my own copy a little bigger so I can read it. And that reflects the 2.5% increase that Lori talked about that's allowed by statute, and then new growth. Last year, we were looking at an estimated new growth of a little over $1 million. This year, we are looking at something substantially less, at about $300,000. That is exactly what we talked about. That's a reduction in the business activity. I'm sorry, not the business activity, a reduction in the amount of construction, new construction, both residential and commercial. So we're seeing a significant slowdown there. And as I mentioned before, we keep very close tabs on that. We are analyzing building permits that get pulled on a monthly basis, and so we're pretty confident in that $300,000 figure. So just some of the other notable items. You know that the town voted to debt exclude a number of different debt issuances, including for the Mitchell School, as well as Bristol Plymouth Technical High School. And for your benefit, although I may not mention it in my budget message, because of that significant debt that the taxpayers have voted to put on themselves, we are going to try to avoid an additional debt exclusion question on the April ballot for roads. We're going to work with DPW to try to squeeze another year out of some of the bad roads. We're also making a much more concerted effort to get state funding for the repair and rebuilding of some of our roads. So that that is in the works. Bridgewater Rainham Regional High School makes up about $3,675,000. Again, that's the Mitchell School and some of the odds and ends that are still outstanding in terms of debt with the district. But as Lori pointed out, we don't carry a lot of debt at all, whether debt excluded or included in the levy. So we are pretty not debt free, but we are pretty low on our debt. And so we are attentive to that and make sure that we manage the debt properly. Let's see, state receipts. You can see Chapter 70. We get a little bit of money for Chapter 70 being educational aid. The vast millions of dollars in educational aid goes directly to the district. So this reflects just a little bit of educational, mostly I think regional, out of district placements, mostly is what we get reimbursed for. The unrestricted government aid, the $4.484 million figure is what the governor had recommended, 3% increase over last year. The veterans, nice. Oh, now I can read it.
Oh, sorry, I don't get all that.
I was giving you all that purely off of memory. I'm just kidding. State-owned land, again, a tiny little increase in state-owned land, but really pretty flat right across all those state receipt figures, with the exception of 3% increase in unrestricted general government aid. So, as you recall, local receipts make up a bit of the pie, a piece of the pie, and motor vehicle excise tax, which is the tax bills generated by the state, and then for the benefit of local communities, when you pay your excise tax, comes partially to the local communities. We're looking at flat. We've actually reduced our estimate there, and this is a tough one because we've got sort of this weird economy right now. It's sort of a tale of two economies. We've got strong economic growth over the last year, which Department of Commerce came out with. not so strong in Massachusetts, but nationwide very strong. And you'd like to think that economic growth sort of translates into motor vehicle excise because people are leasing new cars or buying new cars, and turning in older ones that don't generate as much in excise tax. That doesn't necessarily bear out for us, and we do look at car sales. We look at car lease data that comes in, and we just don't see that strong uptick in motor vehicle excise. So last year we were looking at 300. I keep doing that. 3,750,000. This year we're reducing that a couple of 100,000 to 3,550,000. So that's kind of where we stand there. Right down the line on the local receipts, pretty flat. We're estimating same as last year. Just one note on, because people ask on the cannabis impact fee, that people ask, well, isn't the retail cannabis bringing in lots of 3% tax, local tax money to the town? And it will bring in 3% on whatever the sales are for the retail cannabis, but the retail side of that, of one of those facilities, we've got two medical facilities in town. One is adding retail cannabis, and they just we passed that probably about a year ago, and they just got through the state process. So they just got their state license. So they won't start their retail sales until sometime in February, I'm told. So next year at this time, we'll see some data about that, but we can't use, we actually can't by law use an estimate over and above what we received past fiscal year. So that's why that one remains flat. On the licenses, building, wiring, plumbing, we've reduced that by about $100,000 just based on the slowing of the construction of residential and commercial, which is obviously could be a result of general slowing down. It could be a result, probably more likely, of high interest rates on borrowing. And as interest rates come down, it'll be interesting to see if some of that residential and commercial building picks back up. But that's kind of where we stand at this point. And so transfers and reserves, for those that are unaware, so transfers and reserves are money that we generate elsewhere that we transfer into the general fund. And some of those monies, well, all of those monies go to offset the expenses we have in the general fund. But to highlight a couple of them, to general fund overhead. So all what used to be all the enterprise funds, now it's three of the enterprise funds, because golf is technically no longer an enterprise fund, but does contribute to this transfer, gets transferred to offset the indirect costs associated with those enterprise funds. So collectively, they contribute $562,000, which is just a hair over last year. The ambulance fund generates well over $2,100,000, and but some of that fund is responsible also not only to offset the cost of actually providing paramedics and paying paramedics. It also funds the capital expense of purchasing new ambulances, and every so often a fire engine. So that those revenues come from Medicare, Medicaid, and also private insurance payments for ambulance services. So that is up a little bit. We have been very cautious about that. As you recall, during the time of COVID, ambulance receipts plummeted which is sort of conceptually contrary to what you might think, but nobody, if you felt sick, you didn't call the ambulance because you didn't want to go to the hospital because you didn't want to be potentially exposed to COVID. So our ambulance receipts kind of dried up during that time period, and Lori alluded to it earlier. We were able to offset some of those lost revenues with federal funds, and now we've been able to replenish the ambulance fund, and we've also, based on the strength of the rebound in the ambulance service, been able to pay back the money back into our general federal funds. But otherwise, most of really everything else in that transfers and reserves is level funded, kind of flat. We're not anticipating a significant increase in any of those revenue sources. So that's the revenue sources. So maybe it's a good time to stop. And I know I went through it really rapidly in terms of my speed, but if anybody has any questions there, I'd be happy to Lawyer, I would be happy to answer any of those questions.
So I do have one question. It is it's relatively a recent development, and I'm not sure if there's anything that could be taken away from it for purposes of this discussion, but I'm aware that a few days ago the governor had proposed changes to some of the local option taxes, where they could charge additional amounts. I'm not sure if it was possibly another Municipal Modernization Act type of idea or concept. I wasn't really too sure. Will we see any type of impact? Do you think there would be an appetite for those here in town to offset anything that we're not seeing at this present time? Even though the legislation really hasn't moved far from the governor basically putting it out in the universe, do we see that being something that we might have to consider going forward?
Definitely something to be considered moving forward, but we won't see to the extent that what it's called, the municipal. I can't remember, Lori. What's it called? Municipal. Not modernization. We've already had that one. But anyway,
it's through. It hasn't passed yet. The governor just proposed the bill, so it still has to go through the legislature before we can even consider anything. And they're not sure if any of the actions will be ratified. So, but
yeah,
it's
the
certainly,
Municipal Empowerment Act. Sorry. So yeah, that's so next year at this time, literally next year at this time, we could be looking at a finance committee recommendation on increasing our lodging tax, for instance, or
Meals.
adding meals and adding some percentage on the motor vehicle excise. She's proposing those all to be local options, but at this point, it's just an initial piece of legislation that, and we'll have to see where that goes.
They want to make the municipal people the bad guys and raise all the taxes.
The inevitable battle between state and local government, the one that never ends. The other question I did have, for folks that aren't necessarily familiar with how certain funds in town operate, getting to the enterprise funds, can you just give a brief overview to folks as to why Old Scotland Links Golf Course is no longer considered an enterprise fund? Because I know for the longest time it was.
I will let Lori handle that one.
I can take that. So the town opted to engage with the management company for the operations of the golf course. So we don't have any employees being paid by the town, so the fund doesn't exist anymore because we're not taking in revenues and we're not paying any expenses out. What we did was sign an agreement with the management company to have a percentage of their revenues that will help pay for the existing debt and the existing costs of any of the retirees from that were golf employees. Does that explain, Michael, MJ?
Okay.
She disappeared. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, connection timed out on me again a little bit, but so I guess my other question would be is for snow and ice, for those that may not necessarily be familiar with it, especially the new members, can you give us an idea of the reasoning behind the snow and ice for that 1.9 million amount?
So snow and ice, I think we budgeted in 500,000. And that is something, so we put in the annual budget an amount, usually I think, Lori, it's up to 100 and something thousand. And snow and ice is the only line item in a municipal budget which is allowed to be overspent by law. So what we do on our, we acknowledge that essentially we're acknowledging that we don't budget enough for snow and ice because no municipality wants to budget too much because you can never reduce the amount of your highest, but once you climb up there, you can't reduce that number. So we make sure that we've allocated money that we estimate this time of year that we estimate to be needed to make sure that we can fulfill or solve the deficit in the snow and ice line item. So that's what that's there for.
Mm-hmm.
And then my additional question, again, for our newer members, can you just give a brief definition of what the Elm Street DIF is? I'm familiar with it because I know that was something that the office was working on prior to my departure from that particular part of town government. But for those who are new, they may not necessarily know what the purpose of a DIF is and how it affects our budget.
Nope, good question. Very good question. So the DIF is what's referred to as a DIF. It's District Infrastructure Financing, and it's a financing mechanism that allows us to solve a particular infrastructure problem within a particular geographical zone. And we create the zone, and then any new growth within that zone, the taxes on that new growth go directly to offset the costs, the infrastructure costs of the improvements that we made. So Elm Street, as an example, we spent about $8 million rebuilding Elm Street, which in retrospect was a deal. But we got $3 million in state aid or state grant, MassWorks grant for that. And so we had to borrow I'm using round numbers. We had to borrow the remaining $5 million. In order to pay that $5 million bond, normally we would have to go to the voters and get it debt excluded because we couldn't put the repayment within our levy. So instead of having to do that, you can create this district, and any increase, not the existing property taxes within that district, but any increase can be allocated to pay off that bond. So essentially what you're doing is you're doing a capital project without having to go to the voters for a debt exclusion, and without having to go without adversely impacting the residents' tax bills. So that 688 transfer out is what will go to pay the bond through the general government budget for that Elm Street improvement. So that's proving to be a really successful program for us, and we're looking to possibly replicate that in other areas of town. So, but anyway, that's an explanation for that one.
Yeah, and just to it kind of touches base on what you were talking about, Greg, about what the town can do for, to increase the tax base, and not just on the residents, but first we have to bring the businesses in, and then when we have a substantial amount of them, then we can consider, different tax rates for Basin. But, until we get that built up, and this was one of the ideas of it was a great opportunity to have the district infrastructure financing deal, and we were able to get that $3 million because of the other project at the McElwain School that was a really good project for the town. So we're always trying to get different projects in town, and they kind of escalate, and they help us get other growth projects, and it adds to our tax base too. So
are there any other members that have any questions for Michael or Lori on this? Since we seem to have no other additional questions, if that's everything for that presentation, Laurie and Michael, we can probably move on to the next part of the agenda for new business. Is that correct?
Yep.
All righty. So the next item that's going to be on the new business is the letter B, Order O FY 24-022, an acceptance of gift. And I'm going to pleasantly assume that everyone has read this, but the long and short of it is the town council recently took by friendly eminent domain 2 building lots off of Broad Street, appraised for a value of $340,000. The agreed sales price was $300,000, leaving $40,000 as a gift of equity to the that came to us from Mr. Joseph Bonfiglioli and Anthony Bonfiglioli. So for a little more elucidation and illumination, I would turn this over to the town manager.
Thanks, MJ.
Yeah, so the very short explanation is council wanted to purchase these 2 properties. The owners, so we had an appraisal done. That appraisal was shared with the owners. The owners said, we'll sell it to you for less than the appraised amount by $40,000. And so in return for that, they requested a letter basically acknowledging the gift of equity, and presumably they would like to use that for income tax benefits this year. So that is really it. Pretty simple.
Do any members have any questions regarding the item that is before us? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Rig. Do I hear a second? Second from Ms. Flaparis. Josh, if you would be so kind as to take the roll call vote.
MJ.
Aye.
Julie.
Aye.
Rig.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Catherine.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion was approved.
Excellent. So the next one on the agenda is letter C, Order O-FY 24-023, an acceptance of donation from the Oliari Charitable Foundation. And I will read the too long don't read item of it is the LDR for the younger crowd. The explanation is the Oliari Charitable Foundation has graciously donated $20,000 for the police and fire department. And I will ask that Michael give us a little bit of background on it.
Really just a very generous contribution from the Oliari Foundation, and half designed to go to police, half designed to go to fire for whatever their pressing needs are. And I can tell you that anytime we get sort of one-time money like this, and Bridgewater State does give us an annual gift, but the departments use those almost invariably for capital items that they wouldn't otherwise be able to purchase. Not for operating expense.
Excellent. Do any members of the committee have any questions?
No.
Motion to approve.
Right. I hear a motion to approve. Who made the motion?
Rig.
All right. Rig made a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's a tie for Stephen Pace.
That's right. Give it to Steve.
All right. Ms. Flaparis yields her second to Mr. Pace, who makes the second. So with that said, Josh, could you take the roll call, please?
MJ.
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Rig, Lee,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Catherine.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion was approved.
Alrighty, so now we're next up on the agenda. F, additional items for discussion. I don't have any additional things for discussion tonight, other than for folks, when you saw a little bit of that budget calendar, I'd say let us stay tuned to developments going on with the budget process, as we are going to be starting to get into the forest, as it were, of all the items that'll be before us, and having to hear the discussions in the next couple of months. So I would say everybody keep your ears on, keep your eyes open, and be willing to learn, listen, and ask questions. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to offer for additional discussion tonight?
Mr. Chairman, real quickly, given that we have Michael here, I wanted to know, I know we had talked about or mentioned it some previous meetings ago of getting together for an in-person meeting. Is that still a thing, not allowed, or can we plan for that?
Rick, to answer your question.
Oh, I am. I thought it was
I'll
on
second
mute.
that. That's what I want to save it for.
So we are working on it. We've got some technology needs that we have to address before we can get back. Because if we get back, it won't be just all in person. It's going to be a hybrid setting, and so there is expense associated with that. And we've partly, I won't say we've dragged our feet, but we've stepped carefully through this because this format or hybrid format is temporary. So all the things that we've been allowed to do over the last however many years, 3 years, 4 years, or whatever it's been, have been temporary. There is in the Governor's Municipal Empowerment Act, which was just released a couple of days ago, there is a provision to make most of what we've become used to permanent part of the law. So whether it be hybrid or remote only or what have you. So we are. I'm optimistic, and I don't think that there will be any serious opposition in the legislature to making these things permanent. Once that happens, then we can feel much more comfortable about investing in the technology and the additional people that will likely be needed to allow us to do hybrid meetings. So it's I hear it loud and clear. Ironically, there are some boards and committees that can't wait to get back and be in person, and there's some boards and committees that don't ever want to come back.
And the school committee does meet in person, so why is it that we have to be hybrid?
So the council meets in person too.
Right.
It's just because we can't, I mean, we can either go back to all in person, and right now, I know that that's not going to work because we've got a lot of members of a lot of committees who can only do it because they don't have to leave, whether it's child care or parent care or what have you. So for right now, we're here, but Rig and Julie,
just so you know, my term's up in June, and I don't plan on renewing if we're not in person. And it's not a threat; it's just that I don't find it as beneficial for me, and I'm not, you know what I mean, the way it's been, and I've made that pretty clear. So it'll be another seat.
We do appreciate that, Julie, and we do genuinely appreciate the work that you've done with the committee, and I certainly do understand that there is some level of frustration with it, and Michael has spoken to it. Certainly the benefit of remote participation has been actually rather helpful for a great many towns and cities. In fact, it has actually allowed some towns and cities to have more public participation in their meeting. The planning board alone, just from my experience on that board, putting my planning board member hat on, the amount of participation I've seen just by remote has been very, very well received, and honestly, it's been very helpful.
But that has not been the case with this committee, and we've canceled many meetings due to a quorum, regardless of the fact that we've been hybrid. So that's just from my experience.
that may also just be from circumstances, regardless of if it was hybrid. I'll be fair, Julie. In my time that I was out for an extensive period, if I had been more up to it health-wise, I would have absolutely loved to have had remote. And thankfully, we did have that opportunity. I know.
I understand. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'm just stating mine.
Right.
MJ, if I may.
Yes, Steve.
I just want to commend Michael and your staff for all your efforts going forward. As a business owner, realtor here in town, I have a pretty good grasp on what the people in our town are looking for. We're doing a great job here. The plan that you guys have in place, this allows me to share this with future residents and past residents that I put here in town. To Rig's point earlier about the residential tax rate, we're still lower than Raynham in Middleborough. So we're making a lot of great decisions at the top, and I'm very proud to be part of this committee, and I'm looking forward to what the next year brings. So I just want to commend you all.
Great. Is there any other items for discussion this evening, folks? Do we have anything?
When's the next meeting?
That is a good question. Josh, our schedule, I would say, would probably fall in line with the next council meeting. I'm assuming that's probably in the next week or so, 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it is contingent on if if anything's referred. So that's why there was a gap in this last meeting. So
is our next meeting the 6th of February?
Yes.
Okay. So the earliest we'd probably have a meeting be Tuesday, February 13th.
Yep, and then we do have.
Monday the 12th. My apologies. I'm dealing with another scheduling item. So Monday the 12th would be our earliest.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So if we do get anything from council, our next meeting will be Monday, February 12th, and if I remember correctly, we've now settled on the time of 6:30, correct?
Yeah, that seemed to be the best time for everyone.
Okay.
I think the only person that affected a little bit was Nate.
The chair.
And he said that was to be expected, that might happen sometime. So
yeah.
Fortunately, we have a vice chair to fall back on.
Yep.
So thank you.
So that being said, everybody, like I said before, with participating on this committee, and it's really great that we do, keep your eyes open, your ears ready to listen, and hopefully we will have some items from the council in the next couple of weeks to consider. So let's move on to item G on our agenda, adjournment of the meeting, which is by far, in most members' cases, the best part of the meeting. So since there's no discussion needed, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Motion made by Julie, second by Rig. Josh, if you can do the roll call.
MJ.
Aye.
Julie.
Aye.
Rig.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Catherine.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion was approved. The meeting is adjourned.
All righty.
Thank you,
We'll see you all in a couple of weeks, folks.
All right, take care. Be well.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.